I need you to hate so I can use you for your energy.
This is Real Sales Talk. Real sales advice from real sales practitioners. Giving you tips on how to dominate your sales quota are your co-hosts, Sean Mitchell and Phil Keene. This episode is brought to you by Convertist. We are incredibly excited to have partnered together with Convertist, which helps SaaS and services run managed outbound campaigns for teams looking to drive new pipeline opportunities. For teams targeting mid-size and enterprise deals, Convertist integrates with CRMs like Salesforce to uncover actionable data in their sales processes, which enables them to find areas of improvement and double down on strategies that actually work. Benchmark the lead generation performance expected of a seasoned SDR and identify actionable areas of improvement in a sales process, all out of one place with Convertist. For teams looking to measure and enhance their performance of their sales funnel and architect a better revenue engine, cast an application to join the Convertist Slack group. It's at convertist.com/Slack. That's Convertist, convertist.com/Slack, SLACK. What's going on, everyone? It's Sean from Real Sales Talk, and we are live with another episode, Season 9, Episode 9, the last one before we hit Episode 100, and we've got a great one. We've got Scott Ingram on the show, and if that name sounds familiar, it's because you've got a really great memory. We had him on a season or two ago and to talk about top performers and the things that make them unique. We've asked him to come back on the show and talk a little bit about mentorship and networking, the benefits of what this podcast has done that Scott runs, and how that has helped him kind of get to that next level. So, Scott, welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Sean. It's good to be here. A little bit bittersweet. I'm really bummed that we're losing another very practitioner-focused sales podcast, but I'm always glad to come on and chat with you.
There's it's going to make more room for people who listen and love Real Sales Talk to jump on and get subscribed to your podcast that you're producing now on how often are you doing the episodes now?
Yeah, so the Sales Success Stories podcast, it's a bi-weekly podcast, meaning every other week. So, I was very intentional when we kicked this thing off a little over a year ago, just kind of recognizing how much bandwidth I would actually have. And man, I made the perfect decision. Doing weekly probably would have killed me. I don't think the show would still be around had I picked that pace. But every other week has been perfect, and I'm having a blast with it.
What I think is great about it, though, is that you go really in depth. I mean, yours are like an hour long where you dig deep into your guests and what makes them successful, right?
Yeah, the ultimate compliment, somebody just sent me a note the other day, or they posted on LinkedIn and said that Scott is the Tim Ferriss of the sales world. And that was really the goal. I love the Tim Ferriss show. I love how deep he goes. And for me, this show is just really about deconstructing the world-class sales performers out there, and it's a blast.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's what makes it really unique, to be honest. And what sort of things? So, how long have you been doing the podcast, and what sort of things have you seen since you started?
Yeah, so I started the podcast October of 16. So again, just over a year now. And again, the intent was because there's not enough sales content out there from the people who are in the trenches having the most success. I only interview individual contributors, and I only interview them if they're either number one in their sales organization or if they work for a monster organization. So I've interviewed folks at Microsoft and LinkedIn and ADP and Paychex and a variety of organizations where very large sales forces, lots of different divisions. So in those cases, I'm happy to settle for the top 1%. And the themes are so interesting. I mean, we talked about that a little bit in our last conversation, and I actually re-listened to that this morning. It was actually 4 seasons ago.
Crazy.
Yeah, that was season 6, episode 10. So if you want to go back and listen to that, I think that's a great place to, at that point I had done about 15 episodes. So I'm twice as far along at this stage. And a lot of the themes have remained consistent. In that show, we talked about belief in themselves and in their sales process, and we talked about mentorship actually quite a bit. That was kind of the thread that we went down. And if anything, that theme has and become even more apparent to me in these conversations, and just how impactful it is. And again, I'm talking to the people who are the best of the best, and they are all talking about the individuals that they've surrounded themselves with, the mentors that they have had to help them get to that next level. One of my very favorite interviews was with Trong Nguyen, who is managing a $50 million book of business for Microsoft, doing true game-changing deals in healthcare and financial services. And Trong is the most humble guy on the planet. And the way that he leveraged mentors for everything, and we talked about it in that conversation, was just really, really impressive. And one of the things I know we'll talk about today, I'm actually getting ready to bring together many of the guests who've been on my show in what we're calling the Sales Success Summit here in Austin next May. And Trong was the very first person who, without hesitation, was like, I am there. I will. Yeah. He's actually going to skip the first day or two of his own company's big conference so that he can be there with us, because it was such an important contributor to him and his success. And just that willingness to give back and contribute to this community has been just amazing. I'm learning so much, but I hope also just delivering a ton of value to the audience that's listening to this show and helping them grow and get to the next level. Even if they're not in the room with these folks yet, you can at least kind of absorb through the podcast and through these conversations and surround yourself with sales greatness virtually.
Yeah. One of the things that I think is interesting about this conference is that it's sort of like the salespeople's conference. There's a lot of conferences out there that are put on by, teachers and authors and speakers and companies, that sell products. But and those are all great. I mean, there's many fantastic ones that come to mind that I and probably you, Scott, have benefited from. But I think there's a unique perspective when you go from someone who's trying to, sell a product or sell a book to just top performers who want to share and give away the things that have made them successful and network with like-minded people.
Yeah, that's exactly it. It's kind of the like-minded and wanting to create this community and this opportunity to connect with people that can be your mentors or that you can mentor. And when you look at the sales conference landscape, there's almost nothing that is really truly focused on the individual contributor. Most of the events out there, they're built for the sales leader or the sales enablement or sales operations, really everybody but those of us who have a quota, who are trying to deliver day in and day out. So I wanted something for us. And outside of just getting people to the event and building this thing up, there's no other agenda. There's no upsell at the end where we're going to try and sell you our $10,000 training and coaching program. Like, no, this is it. And, some people have said, Scott, you should create, mastermind groups out of this and sell access to that. I'm like, you know what? I don't have time. I'm a salesperson myself. There's only so many things I can do. I've got the podcast. We're doing the event. I'm done. Like that's about as much extra fun stuff that I can effectively manage. So we'll get the people in the room together. And if you want to take ownership of building a mastermind group and collecting some of these people, do it. That's why we're bringing everybody together, so that it can kind of serve as that seed to really create these relationships and allow people to surround themselves. We talked about it in the last episode, and certainly something that guides me. It was you that said it, Sean, that you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. Well, are you really making a conscious effort to be mindful of who it is that you're surrounding yourself with? And so I just want to create an opportunity where the people that you can surround yourself with are at extraordinary levels, right? I mean, the last episode that I have live at this point, as we're having this conversation today, was with Ryan Alvord at Paychex, and he was number 1 of 400 last year in his division, and perhaps more impactful beyond that is that he was in the top 10 for the last 8 years in a row. So this isn't just like flash in the pan, like, oh, I got super lucky and walked into this amazing deal and woohoo, I'm number 1, and I'm not even going to be on the leaderboard next year. There's a ton of consistency. And it's something that I try and vet. I'm really not interested in somebody that won the sales lottery and just walked into a mega deal and can't replicate that, right? These are folks who really have something meaningful and consistent to share in the results that they've produced over the course of their career.
One of the conundrums of top performers, I think, Scott, is if you're at the top, there's not very many people that you can look to get mentorship or get help. And, to me, this conference is just that. It's a cadre, a collective of top performers who will be able to share some of those things that have gotten them to that point, and in your example that you just gave, kept them there for many years. So, this is the cream of the crop conference where, people who care about their career and who want to not only be the best, but continue to be the best. This seems like the best place to do that.
Well, that's exactly it. I was thinking just the other day, I was like, it would be really cool if we created some type of, is there swag? Is it a hat? Is it a shirt? Is there something that we include for the folks that are there? And one of the things that jumped in my head was, what if we made something that had a bullseye on the back? Mm-hmm. Right? Because when you're number 1, you've got a bullseye on your back. And a lot of times there's not as much to go chase after. By definition, when you're number 1, there's nobody ahead of you. There's nobody to kind of strive for and try and take down. So, the other reason I'm bringing this together is to allow the individuals who've been on my podcast to have their own community as well, right? It was really creating an opportunity for them to connect. And frankly, I wanted to meet them. I've met maybe 6 or 7 of the about 40, 30, I don't know, I've lost count at this point. Of all the people that have been on the show, I've only met a half a dozen in person. So, just having the opportunity to spend really meaningful time together, but again, creating that community within them, because this is a challenge that they struggle with. When you're number 1, it's a different mindset. It's a different thing, especially trying to stay there and be consistent in that, knowing that you don't have somebody out in front of you to learn from and emulate.
Yeah. So I want to take a sidestep here and highlight something that I think is pretty spectacular about you, Scott. And that's this idea that you yourself are a practitioner. You've got a sales quota. You work for a company, and this podcast that you run and this conference that you're putting on is something that you're doing on the side, right?
Yeah.
And so what has that done for you personally? How has that helped you grow into a top performer?
Yeah, so many ways. The biggest contribution for me personally is the mentors and the relationships that I've built through the podcast. I mean, I beyond what everybody's able to listen to in the interviews and the conversations that I've had that we've released publicly, obviously there are many additional conversations and email interactions and other things with this caliber of professional that I have benefited from massively. 2017 will will have been one of my very best years in sales, and I'm very confident that 2018 will be even better. But the other thing that I think it's done for me is I've always been a very organized, very focused person, but in order to pull all of this off, I have really had to be all over it to make that happen. And so some of that is utilizing the resources that are around you. So I've always had some great sponsors around the show that have helped fund some of the production, some of the dirty work that happens behind the scenes, as you know, in terms of turning out a quality product. But just by and large, it's having to be so dialed in to the way that I manage my time so that I can produce first and foremost in my sales role, because that is absolutely where my bread gets buttered, right? Yeah, maybe I'll make a few dollars on the conference, but it is not going to be any kind of life-changing money. You know, that's really that's not the goal at all. But just that process. And I've actually taken this podcast is technically my third podcast. The second podcast remains active, and I do that for my primary employer. We work in the Oracle Marketing Cloud space. We're a professional services firm. And I host a podcast for them called Inspired Marketing. And it's basically the same concept. Again, this is a frustration that I have in general in life. I'm like, enough pitching. We want to hear the success stories. We want to hear what's behind reality. Tell us about the hard parts. Tell us about the cool stuff that you're doing. It's all about kind of that inspiration. And so with the Inspired Marketing podcast, we're reaching out into this very niche space and able to shine a bright spotlight on people doing amazing work. And it's the greatest door opener on the face of the planet. You know, I probably have an 80% response rate when I reach out cold, because it's all about them, and it's all about giving them an opportunity to be the hero and the focal point of that story. And just like with the sales podcast, the relationship that begins to build, because not only do I have the interview, but there's typically a prep call or two as we figure out what are we going to talk about, where are we going to focus. And the magic of these things is the really ultra juicy stuff happens before and after I turn on the microphone to record. That's when they tell me all the things are like, okay, Scott, here's the real deal. I can't talk about this publicly, but here's the super ultra mega secret. So that's a little bit of actually what's driving the sales event is I'm like, okay, can we create a space where it's actually safe to talk about those things in a semi kind of public space? But what that does from a relationship building perspective and from a sales perspective is amazing. And it's actually become anchor content for us as an organization. So at this point, twice a year, we're producing the Inspired Marketing magazine. And 60, 70, maybe even 80% of the content in that magazine is coming directly from those interviews on the podcast. And that is starting to build at this point to where I'm still waiting on final approval. But with 90% confidence, I can say that in the next couple of months, I will have a Fortune 50 CMO on that podcast, and then they will likely be the cover model of our next issue of the magazine, which coincides with our biggest event of the year, and we give that out to everybody, the thousands of people that attend that event. So it's been so impactful on so many levels. And I think that just finding this, you know, Sean, I always think about you when I was interviewing Brandy, who's one of the top real estate professionals that I interviewed on the show. And she's like, you've just got to find that thing that's working for you. You kind of have to spread yourself out a little bit first to kind of figure out that marketing channel that works. And then once you get it, just go all in. So for me, that has been podcast. That has been audio. I love having these conversations and what they lead to. And I don't do the video thing that you do. So the pressure is even further off, where all we have to do is make sure that we have microphones and Skype, and we're good.
Mm-hmm. So to kind of break this down tactically and make this segment that we're talking about here something that our listeners can kind of take something away from here, find a way to leverage the audio piece of and video piece if you want to, but certainly the audio piece with the convergence of video and the internet. Video is definitely big, but there are times when I know I myself can't watch video when I'm driving my car. I'm not watching video. I'm listening to audio. In fact, I listened to a podcast this morning on Tesla, and it's one that I look forward to every week, every Wednesday. It comes out and gets me excited about what the company's doing. So, creating opportunity, I think, is one benefit to a podcast. Creating sales opportunity, sort of like what you're talking about with your company, where you are cold emailing and cold reaching out to people that you've never met before to interview them. And that by nature is dually beneficial because you're making new contacts and you're building this network of people that are also potential customers. So someone who's listening to this could create a new podcast around your company and start reaching out to your ideal customers and interviewing them. I think a second really cool thing to do, if you just want to build a brand and a name, sort of like what Kyle Gutzler has been doing. He's been leveraging his success, and he's been on your podcast, Scott. He's been on Real Sales Talk, and I'm sure that he's been on others to try and build a brand, and that in itself helps sales people as well. I think maybe you've got some things to say about that particular piece about brand building. So I'll just kind of take a breath here and let you share not only what you've experienced personally about how your brand has grown, but also the others that you have interviewed.
Real Sales Talk family, want to take a quick break just to say thank you to our partner Convertist. If you're interested in improving your game to drive leads, opportunities, or closes, join the Convertist Slack group, a place where sales and marketing operators can talk best practices to architect a revenue engine. Cast an application at convertist.com/Slack. That's convertist.com/Slack. Now let's get back to the episode.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's fun that you mentioned Kyle, because Kyle will absolutely be on the stage at the Sales Success Summit. So it's fun to bring that one full circle. I think you have to be conscious of what works best for you. Where are you most naturally aligned? Are you comfortable with video? And some people are, and they've got unique talents that they can share there. I actually hosted a number of weeks ago, Vidyard did a kind of sales and marketing video conference, and I interviewed 3 different folks. We did kind of a webinar thing who were successfully using video in their process. And one of them, he would write songs for his prospects and would sing them songs. I mean, there's so many creative things you can do. I would never do that. That doesn't fit me and who my personality is. And certainly one of the other big themes that has come out of all of my conversations on the Sales Success Stories podcast is you have to kind of find the true you and what's authentically you, and then maximize that. So could be a podcast. Maybe you're a great writer. Maybe you're into the audio format and a podcast works great. Maybe it's video. Whatever it is, I'd say find the one thing. Don't try to be everything everywhere. Find the thing that you think you are strongest in, and recognize that when you start, you're probably going to suck. And that's the reason why I had the vision for this podcast, and it was actually a much bigger vision, but the core of this podcast years ago. And I launched 2 shows first because I wanted to get all of my bad radio out.
Yeah.
I knew that I was not going to be great in the beginning. And believe me, the very first podcast, it basically doesn't exist anymore. Thank God, because it was awful. But you just have to do it. You have to get through it, whatever that is for you. And just know that if it's video, you're not going to like the way you look. And if it's audio, you're going to hate the way you sound. And if you're writing, you're probably not going to think you're a very good writer. And you know what? Just ignore it. Just keep going. Even in the times where I have thought, I hate my voice. I can't stand listening to this. Everybody's coming to me saying, Scott, you have the perfect voice for this. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't know what the hell you're talking about, but okay, I'm going to go with it. And eventually you just sort of get used to it, and you keep going. So find find that special niche thing. A book that really informed a lot of how I am applying this was from a friend of mine, Joe Polizzi, who started the Content Marketing Institute. He wrote a book called Content Inc. Again, it's much more for content marketers and folks in that end of the world, but I think extraordinarily applicable to sales professionals, especially those who are interested in building their own brands. And if you listen to sales podcasts, look at Will Barron, look at Sean and Phil. These folks have built something really meaningful. You look at video, you look at Morgan Ingram, and where he's going with his career because he got noticed. All of those things are so powerful. You just have to find the right one for you and recognize that it's not going to be pretty in the beginning. You just keep going.
Yeah, I think that's probably in not to take this too far, but repetition really matters. If you want to get good at something, most people aren't just innately and naturally good at it. You have to do it over and over and over again. And the example that comes to mind, or the comparison, is your sales pitch or your sales calls. You probably weren't awesome the very first sales call for your company, but over time, the more that you did it, the more that you worked in different hooks and different phrases and questions, and as you kind of start to iron out that piece or part, it gets better and it gets more polished. And you probably, the people that are listening to this probably gravitate towards one of those things, whether it's visual or auditory or kinesthetic, and find a way to leverage those things that come natural to you or that you really like and are excited about. And maybe some of the people listening to this might start a sales podcast. Now, we're going to be Real Sales Talk is going to be going away. So there's going to be this void or spot for someone to kind of jump in there and come at it from a different angle and do something unique. I know there's a couple. You had mentioned one, Scott, that also has kind of wrapped up, right? What is his name? The guy who read the Enterprise Sales Podcast?
Yeah, Noah Goldman. So not somebody I've talked to, but somebody I've been meaning to reach out to. So when this goes live, I will have every excuse in the world to say, hey, Noah, I've been thinking about you. But same as you guys. He got to 100 episodes, and that was just kind of the end. And things change. I mean, that's fine. But it's doing that process and finding what really grabs you and pulls you forward, because this is hard. I don't think that this is something that you force yourself to do. Like, oh, I should start some type of content that I'm creating or whatever it is. There's got to be a little bit more of a why behind it and something that you're drawn to, because it's not easy.
Yeah, totally. All right, so we're going to go ahead and wrap up here, and I want to give you a chance to tell our listeners where they can learn more about the conference, when it is, how much is it, what can they expect?
Yeah, absolutely. So best way to learn about the conference, two ways. The main conference website is at top1summit.com. That's with the number 1. The main podcast website is top1.fm. And what I would encourage you to do, if you have any interest at all in what we're doing with the summit, go back to the Sales Success Stories podcast, and there is an episode in there conveniently called Sales Success Summit. I think it's Sales Success Summit 2018. And I spent 20 or 30 minutes really talking through all of the background, the unique experience that we're trying to create. The event itself is here in Austin, May 7th and 8th. The timing is very, very intentional. So that is the middle of a quarter. It's the beginning of a month, and it's also a Monday and Tuesday. And I did that because, one, I didn't want to impact too much selling time, but I also wanted to recognize Austin is a freaking cool town, and you want to come here and check it out. So come on Friday and spend the weekend here in Austin, and then join us first thing Monday. Or if you're leading a sales team and you want to bring your team together, this is a perfect sort of QBR primer, right? Let me get your people amped up in a day and a half, Monday and Tuesday, and then you guys can spend your own day and a half together going through territory plans and what you're going to do, but incorporate some of the great things that you just learned and make this content and make the learnings really actionable. And then Sean, the last thing that I will share, and it's the thing I may be most excited about, is there's so many things that I'm doing so intentionally to help create relationships and true kind of meaning and bonding in this event. So that Monday night, after we wrap that first full day, and then there's a happy hour, so we can do some bonding there. But I've chosen about a dozen iconic Austin restaurants, and we're going to do a giant dine around. So each of the presenters will be at a different restaurant, and we've got everything from Tex-Mex to barbecue to 5-star sushi here in Austin. So you can kind of figure out what's the right price point, who do you want to hang out with, and go and build some much more intimate. I mean, the event itself, we're actually doing it in a movie theater that's full service. So people will bring you food and drinks throughout the entire event. So we're trying to make it unique and comfortable from that perspective as well, but also just so meaningful from a relationship building perspective. So again, top1summit.com. And Sean, for the Real Sales Talk listeners, if they use the referral code REAL, REAL, they will save $150. They'll have to go look at what the pricing is, because I don't remember, depending on where the release of this is. The very first best price tier will have just expired, but I think you're going to have until the end of January for the next one. So get in there, come join us. Would love to have you be a part of this thing.
That's awesome. I'm just going through my head thinking, what are these restaurants going to be? So I'm just going to take a wild guess here because I love Austin. Chuy's. Is Chuy's one of them?
Chuy's is one.
Okay. Number 2, you said barbecue. So I'm going to guess Franklin's or Salt Lick.
Neither of those, just because of one, we don't have time for people to wait in line for 4 hours at Franklin's, and the Salt Lick is a little bit too far out of town. And I was hoping to find the list, and of course the name escapes me right now. Okay. There's a place downtown, and they call it Fancy Barbecue, so it's kind of an upscale barbecue joint. They've got some really unique, really good food. It's a good experience.
That's awesome. Really cool. Well, that's going to be a ton of fun. And for our listeners, go check it out. See if it's a good fit. And if you're interested in rubbing shoulders with other great people, this may be the one for you. So, Scott, great to catch up again, and good to see your face. And can't wait to meet you in person at some point here very, very soon. Real Sales Talk family, thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next and last episode 100.
Congrats on a great run, Sean. Thanks for having me, and tell Phil I said hello.
Absolutely. Thanks for listening to Real Sales Talk, and a big thank you to our sponsor, Convertist. If you enjoyed this episode, go write a review on iTunes or any other podcasting platform.